14. So item number 1, meeting practices and information. The public, members of the public may observe the meeting via NUSD YouTube channel, live transmission on Comcast 26, or in person at the NUSD boardroom. And Spanish translation is not available right now via Zoom. It is available in person. We have Ms. Martinez here to help us. Regarding public comment, the public will have the opportunity to address the Board of Education regarding non-agendized matters and agendized items with a live audio-only comment via Zoom with advance notice requested by email at publiccomment@newarkunified.org, a written comment by submitting a speaker card via email at publiccomment@newarkunified.org, or with live in-person comments by submitting a speaker card with the executive assistant. Okay, so Ms. Lemus, moving on to 1.2, roll call. Can we do a roll call vote, please? Roll call. Can we do roll call? And start with Member Thomas, please.
Member Thomas?
Here.
Member Nguyen?
Here.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Here.
And President Hill?
Here. And then just point of clarification. So Member Thomas is out of town right now, and regarding it with a family matter, but she has graciously agreed to join via Zoom. And I think that we've done all the proper postings. I don't know if there's any additional commentary that we need to provide. Okay. Okay, great. So moving on to 1.3, public comment on closed session items. So we only have one comment card, and given that the item in question involves this person and their family, per the Brown Act protocols, we're going to permit this person to come into closed session because it's a personnel issue or a confidential issue, and we need to discuss it at that point. So once we recess, we'll have somebody come and get you to come in and speak with us. Okay, so moving on to 1.4, recess to closed session. We're covering 2 items. 2.1, public employee appointment, employment, discipline, dismissal, release, Government Code 54957 of Subdivision B1, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services / CBO and Principals. And 2.2, conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9, Subdivision D2 or 3, 2 cases. And with that, we are recessing to closed session. reconvening from closed session at 7:40, and apologize to the public for the delay. Okay, so item 3.1, report of closed session actions. We do have something to report out, so this is for item 2.2, anticipated litigation settlement agreement 2024 NUSD 003. There was a motion to approve. Member Thomas moved, Member Jones seconded, and the in favor were Jones, Wen, Thomas, and Hill. There was no one who was not in favor, and Member Plancarte was not present. Okay, so moving on to item 4.1, Pledge of Allegiance. Can we all please stand and repeat after me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So moving on to meeting practices. And given that we don't, do we have any speaker cards? No, she's on the agenda, right, Fred? Oh, okay. Okay, great. Okay. Given that we only have one speaker and she already knows the practices, we're not going to reread them at this point. So moving on to approval of the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Before you approve that agenda, can I make a couple recommendations, please? We'd like to pull a couple items of staff. We would like to pull item number 11.8, and we'll be bringing that back. That is a contract that did not get updated. We're also pulling 9.4, which is the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. They are unable to present this evening, and that item will be brought back on August 6th, and they send their apologies. They are not feeling well this evening. And on 10.2, we would like to amend the POW report with regards to pulling the Kennedy principal appointment.
Okay, so we're pulling 11.8, and then what number was the bond item?
The bond item was 9.4.
9.4.
And then 10.2 was an amendment to the POW report, pulling the Kennedy principal assignment.
Okay, great. Yes, and 11.8. So 9.4, 10.2, well, 10.2 is an amendment, and 11.8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the agenda with the exception of we're pulling items 9.4 and 11.8, and we're amending 10.2? Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with those alterations.
I'll second.
Okay, so Member Jones moves, Member Wen seconds. Do we want to do a roll call vote, Ms. Lemus, or do you want to do it through board docs?
I could do the voting through board docs.
Oh, yeah, we have to, actually, I think we have to do it verbal because, yeah, because Member Thomas is remote, so she can't access board docs. So if we could do a verbal roll call vote, please, starting with Member Thomas.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
President Hill?
Yes, okay, motion carries. All right, so moving on to item 6.1, public comment on non-agenda items. So I think that this is where Ms. Villa would come and speak, correct? Right. So you don't have anything to contribute this evening? We're going to be the poorer for it. Okay.
I'm going to owe something.
Okay.
She likes donuts with sprinkles on it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
All right. Mental note to self. Okay. Okay, so then we don't have any speaker cards for that. Do we have anybody online, Ms. Lemus?
We do not have any public comment from online.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on to 6.2, public comment on agenda items. Again, I don't have any speaker cards, and it sounds like we don't have anybody online. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so then we can move on to 7.1, superintendent report.
Thank you. Good evening, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share just a few details with you. Staff has been very busy this past week since our last board meeting. We've been working hard with trying to find some new staff members to come join our team. And so I really want to reach out and thank the number of people that have been on the interview panels that have made this all happen. I'd also like to thank Rochelle Pachowski in advance of the vote here this evening for her work on the LCAP and also going back and making the modifications that were requested. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. We are ready this evening to be able to bring two of our biggest recommendations to you this year, and that really is our LCAP and our budget. That really drives the conversation of what we have and what we do here each and every day to be able to support kids and to be able to support the staff here in the district. So we're excited about those two particular items that are on the agenda this evening. The last thing I want to share with you in the community is that the board will be having a special workshop. It will be a study session that will occur on the 14th and 15th of July. This is around the board work. I've been in conversation with CSBA. The board should have received their survey. That survey needs to be completed by the 8th so that CSBA can do their work behind the scenes to get in preparation for that session. What we would like to ask of the board is that you would consider on the 15th having a very short meeting, more related to the PAL and a couple of contractual items that we may need to have done in support of CDE. It would be a very small agenda, and there may be one closed session item that we're aware of at this time that we would want to bring to your attention. We see it as being a very brief meeting, mainly just to take care of business.
And this is in advance of the CSBA sessions.
This would be after the CSBA
after.
session. I would do it afterwards.
Okay.
Instead of time, because your CSBA session starts on a Sunday. That's kind of an unusual
Oh, so you
time.
do it on Monday.
So we would do the other session afterwards.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And with that concludes my report. I want to wish everybody a healthy and safe summer during your travels.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay. All right, so moving on to 8.1, presentation of 24-25 California School Dashboard Local Indicators.
It's my pleasure this evening to introduce to you Rochelle Pachowski, who's going to share with you the information with regards to our local indicators. This is a requirement of the California Department of Education.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm grateful to be here to present to you our California dashboard and local indicator results. Now, this is a requirement from the state of California since January of 2020. And the purpose of this presentation is to review any publicly reported data prior to the adoption of the LCAP. As part of the process, the state has provided self-assessment tools that we have used in the development of this presentation. So in priority one, priority one is about basic services, and this includes teacher assignments and access to instructional materials, clean and safe schools. And this is the FIT report from the Williams Act. And so that comes all from Williams. We don't touch any of that. The rest of the indicators, which are 2, 3, 6, and 7, and I know there's a jump in there. We only report on 2, 3, 6, and 7. And those are a self-reflection tool. And so 2 is the academic standards. 3 is parent engagement. 6 is school climate. And 7 is the access to a broad course of study. So on the local self-reflection, We're talking about, number one, providing professional learning for teachers and the recently adopted academic standards and our curriculum frameworks. Now remember, this is already on things in the past, not our new ELA adoption. And so we do have full implementation and sustainability with NGSS. We have full development of ELA and math. And we have initial development of ELD, history and social science, because we did adopt the history social science 2 years ago, and we're still in the development stage for providing PD for that. Instructional materials that are aligned to recently adopt academic standards in our curriculum framework. We have full implementation and sustainability for ELA, math, NGSS, history and social science. And we have full development of ELD. For implementing policies and programs to support staff in identifying areas where they can improve in instructional delivery aligned to the recently adopted academic standards and our curriculum frameworks. We have full development in ELA, math, NGSS, history, social science, and ELD. For the next slide. This is still priority 2. We have progress in developing the capacity of staff, and we have full implementation and sustainability 5 in physical education model standards and visual and performing arts, 4 in world languages and CTE, because we added more classes last year and will continue to add again next year, and initial development in health education current standards. For progress in creating welcoming environments for all families in the community, we have full implementation and sustainability for identifying the professional learning needs of groups and teachers or staff as a whole, and full development in identifying the professional learning needs of individual teachers, and the initial development of providing support for teachers in the standards that they have not yet mastered. And this is total alignment of the teacher induction program. The next one is priority 3, thank you very much, is building relationships through parent and family engagement. We do have full implementation of sustainability progress in developing the capacity of staff, full development and progress in creating welcoming environments for all families in the community, progress in supporting staff to learn about each family's strengths, cultures, languages, and goals for their children, and progress in developing multiple opportunities for the LEA and school sites to engage in two-way communication between families and educators using language that is understandable and accessible to families, and this is our Parent Square. Building partnerships for student outcomes. We do have full implementation and sustainability to provide professional learning and support to teachers and principals to improve the school's capacity to partner with families, support families, and to understand and exercise their legal rights and advocate for their own students and all students. And full development to provide families with information and resources to support student learning and development in the home. They did note in our LCAP surveys that our school community would like to have an increase in homeschool connections and communication and common expectations around how teachers communicate, what students are learning, and how families can support and extend learning at home. So that is an area we will be working on for next year. Our next slide for priority 3 is still parent and family engagement, seeking input. We are in full sustainability and implementation of progress in building the capacity and supporting principals and staff to effectively engage families in advisory groups and with decision making. As a reminder that, when we did start off last year, academic year, we did have all of the principals and advisory groups in place. And full development for progress in building the capacity of and supporting family members to effectively engage in advisory groups and decision making. And this includes our Project to Inspire, our LCAP, our school site councils, our ELACs, our DLAC, and so forth. Jumping to priority 6, school climate. NUSD administrators, a local climate survey every year that provides valid measure of perceptions of school safety and connectedness through California Healthy Kids Survey. So this you will see is from the 22-23 school year, because the results for our CHIC survey, which is California Healthy Kids Survey, for the 23-24 school has not been disaggregated yet, and so we do not have that data. However, you can see from here, we have the student survey completion from 22-23, staff survey completion, and parent survey completion. On priority 7 is the access to a broad course of study. And this is our elementary schools and our secondary schools. In our elementary schools, we have standard-based report cards that provide students and families with information about progress. And all our students receive daily instruction in reading, language arts, math, science, and social science. In addition, arts and the STEM programs are provided to all. In the secondary schools, we have a course catalogs, review information for the meeting of A to G requirements. We support for students not meeting course requirements is provided during regular intervention periods. As a reminder, these are bullet points are from the state of California that we have to meet or exceed. Alignment of ROP and CTE pathways increase access for students, and academic departments reflect on student data and adjust plans. So as a district, we monitor the level of access that students have to a broad course of study through our attendance, our report cards, as well as monitoring for our A to G course completion, our AP course enrollment, and our CTE pathway completion. Because of that, we have reported to the state of California for our overall rating summary that our implementation of state academic standards priority 2 is met, our parent engagement priority 3 is met, our school climate priority 6 is met, and our access to a broad course of study priority 7 is met for the 23-24 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Pachowski. Questions from the board? Member Thomas, you have any questions? Member Thomas? You unmute? Okay, I guess there's no questions on that end. So quick couple questions, Ms. Pachowski. So first of all, who was involved in putting the who participated in putting the self-reflections together?
Well, it depends on the areas, but for example, in the academic range, that would be the Director of Teaching and Learning, which is also the Director of Special Projects, the Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, Superintendent, and our principals. And so we're, judging that strength. For things like parent engagement, that would be all of our parent groups, which would be the LCAP, school site councils, ELAC, DLACs, and so forth in our surveys. For our school climate, that would be our CHIC survey, which includes our parents, our school staff, and our students, as well as everybody else involved. And then the access to a broad course of study that is based again on what the state of California requirements are, what we have in our course catalogs, what we offer our students, and what classes that they take, and their completion of that.
Okay, and then from a process perspective, so you look at all these different criteria, you then come up with a score. Right, and then there's multiple scores, but then it leads up to these 4 different areas, and then you determine based on the scores whether we have met the standard or not. Do we know what the consequences are if we say we haven't met a standard?
Yes, so it's self-reporting, so all of this comes from data. So we do have like data quest and everything else that we do. I mean, SBAC scores, everything is involved in this. And so I mean, it can go either way. So if we say that we have not met, again, it's a self-reflection, and it goes on the California dashboard, that it says that we've not met, and then our plan to meet. If we report that we've met and California Department of Education comes back and says, I don't think you did, let us see your data, and then we do have to show them our data for that. But they give us metrics that we use in order to determine this score.
And so if we say we haven't met something, we have to put in a plan to correct, right? I think that's what you're saying.
Correct.
And then are there like people parachuted in from CDE to come and like crawl into all the nooks and crannies, or is this just sort of a perfunctory?
Well, it is based upon our LCAP, and it's our metrics for our LCAP. And so in our next presentation, I will show you some of those metrics and where they're belonging to, but basically, it's already there in our LCAP and in all of our other information that we report to the state of California already. They already have access to our SBACs. They already have access to our LPACs. And so we aren't reporting anything that isn't already there.
And are you going to be presenting this evening the ELA and math scores for the different schools?
I am not, but it is in the LCAP, and I can show you where that's located.
I guess what I'm saying is, do we have any new data there, or is this from last year?
This is from, everything is from, everything is a year behind on the California dashboard. And so all of our SBAC and everything else for the 23-24 school year has not been disaggregated as of yet.
And that'll come in like September or something?
Yeah, end of August, early September, correct.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking all these questions is I noticed as I looked at the more detailed document that you have there, right, that there's a lot of areas where I see very few areas where we're saying we haven't met, and it's on a scale of 1 to 5, and we got a number of 4s, we got a number of 5s. And in my opinion, like when you score a 5, that means you're perfect. And yet, I know at least from last year's test scores, we weren't perfect. Right? We got a lot of work to do. And so, and I think that the only way that we can improve is if we're straight shooters around the metrics. Right now, I can understand if we were, how can I put it? I can understand if there were punitive consequences to reporting this that we might reconsider, but if there's no punitive action, why don't we just be straight shooters about it? So, I mean, because again, when we say like we're a 5, especially in areas like academic performance, I mean, I don't think the public believes that. I don't think we believe that.
Okay, so I think that, did you see this document here? So
Yeah, I
this
think
is
that's what I'm
the
looking at.
document for so on, for example, on like page 6, it says rate the LEA's progress in making instructional materials that are aligned to the recently adopted academic standards. Okay,
Yes.
so this first part here is, do we have the instructional materials in place? It doesn't say, do we score the highest? That's not what it's asking. So we do have the instructional materials. Are we working towards implementing them? That's not in 2, but that's in for our teacher induction program. Yes, we are. We have a fully developed teacher induction program. So this is saying, do we have the policies and programs in place? It doesn't say, where do we fall in the scores? Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, and I understand that some of these things are saying, okay, do we have this, right? So obviously we have instructional materials.
Correct.
But if we look at number 3, rate the LEA's progress in implementing policies or programs to support staff in identifying areas where they can improve in delivering instruction aligned to the recently adopted academic standards. And then it includes things like collaborative time, focused classroom walkthroughs, blah, 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 right? And then it breaks it down across ELA, mathematics, science, history. We're ranking ourselves as 4. And according to the rubric, it says that's full implementation. And so my feeling is, well, I mean, okay, so maybe we fully implemented a program, but is it a program that's delivering the results that we want, right?
Oh, that's correct. And is it delivering the results? But that's not what it's asking. It's asking, do we have the focused classroom walkthroughs? And we did have those in place. And that was all structured out. And we did that with our LLA meetings when we had an assistant sup of ed services. And was there teacher pairing? Is there teacher pairing? Yes. Do we have collaborative time? Yes. I can point to every one of those things and show you where that is and that we have that in place. Was it followed through on the entire year? No, but the policy is there and it is in place, and that's what the CD is asking.
Yes, and by the way, Ms. Buchowski, I hope you know, since you've been up here a few times, that I'm not trying to jump down your
Oh, no,
throat,
I
and it's not
understand
personal.
exactly. I just want to be very clear
Yeah.
that I hear what you're saying, but that's not what it's asking.
Yeah, and I understand that we're required to report this back to the state, right?
Right.
And so, but what I would like to say, and this is not so much directed at you, but to all of us, that we need to have an additional set of metrics that really focuses in on achieving the outcomes that we're looking for in terms of test scores, et cetera.
And we do in the LCAP. And so I'm more than happy to show that to you.
Okay.
Today. And so I do appreciate that. And I'd like to just clarify when you say, well, of course we have instructional materials. Just an FYI, there are districts in California that don't. And so, we are meeting those expectations. And, being on both the principal side and in the Williams Act and all that, this district works really hard to ensure that all of our students have access to those materials and to a broad course of study. So I do think that those wins are there. Anybody who was in on this, we all agree that the policies and procedures are there. It's just, and we're trying to implement them to fidelity, but working towards that so there are strong fives in every single category is definitely something we do need to work on.
Right, great. So thank you. Any additional questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Buchowski. Okay. And so we're moving on to now LCAP. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back. I so appreciate that.
By the way, this
Michelle
might be
Pielski.
the Ms. Buchowski show tonight, so
Yeah,
thank
no,
you.
I'm so grateful you're all centered on me. That's awesome. No, I do appreciate the time that you've given me, and so I do want to ensure you that we did listen to your recommendations and for changes that needed to be made. And so we just want to go through some of those. For example, the first one was that district strategic goals in the plan summary did not align with the LCAP goals. And so basically when we start, what we did is okay. So can you go to the other presentation where it's just the, yeah, perfect. Can you go to page 3? 3. Sorry about that. Okay. So I can't see that from here. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to get my cheat sheet. Okay, here we go. So if you'll notice there, almost to the bottom of the page there, we did put in the district strategic goals and making sure that those were inside of our general summary. And then if you look, for example, on page 20, which is our first goal. Are we on page 20? Okay. So if we look on page 20, so what we did on each one of these goals is we aligned it with how the district, how it aligns with the district goal. So for example, in goal 1, it says, oh dear. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. All right, then. So what it says up there is that it does align with our district strategic goals of goal 1. And then if you look on, and don't move the page, but if you look on page 30, which is goal number 2, and page 40, which is goal number 3, We did align, we can't undo the goals, but we did focus on how it aligned with our district strategic goals, if I'm making sense. Does that make sense at all? Okay. And so then, what I wanted to show you, if you'll just scroll down a little bit. Oh, just a little bit, not all that much. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, right there. Oh, yeah, just a little bit up a little, just a little. There you go. Keep going. Okay, so, for example, in our district strategic goals, it says that, we're going to have an improvement on our SBAC scores of 2% and 5% in subgroups. And so this is the metrics that we've built in, and each one of these metrics aligns with that. But the metrics are, for the LCAP, are higher than the district strategic goals that were made. For example, the mathematics and the SBAC scores. And so they have percent met or exceeded. Now, this is 2023 because, again, 2024 has not been implemented, or we won't see that. That'll be year one. So you can see that we have, for example, there are all students in our schools, 35.17% of them have achieved or met or exceeded the standards in math. And then the metrics, could you move down just a little bit? You can't see it. There you go, keep going, there you go. And then the metrics in 3 years, our targeted outcome is 50%. And so that is a larger increase than a 2% or 5%.
Page 40, I think.
Sorry, it's a little hard because all the documents are in one, and so
Yeah.
we're trying to get to the right.
Correct.
correct
So the
document
state of
in the whole
California,
file.
Ed Code says that we had to do it that way. So the very first document that you have in there is the LCFF budget document. That's 4 pages. And then the next document is the annual update. And I think that's, 45 pages? Did we say that? And then it goes into the LCAP and it starts all over again. So I do apologize for that.
It's like
Yes.
page 70.
It is a tedious document.
It is tedious.
Yes.
And I really want to thank Rochelle and Pam for going back and reworking this, and Mandy for putting it all together.
Mm-hmm. But each of these metrics is, so keep going down. If you'll notice that we have, we've broken down right there, marginalized population, because our LCAP is to provide services for our youth that normally doesn't receive them. So we do have to make sure that we are looking at homeless, our socially, economically disadvantaged, our students with disabilities, and then our groups, African American, Asian, Filipino, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, white, and 2 or more races. And so that's all documented there. And not only then do we use the SBAC scores, but we also use iReady scores, which is our local measurement. Keep going down.
But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just a little bit confused because you said that you've woven in our board goals,
Yes.
right? And our board goals were very simple, but very clear,
Correct.
right? And we said we're expecting an overall 2% increase in ELA scores from the prior year to the current year. Now we haven't received, we obviously haven't received the latest scores.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I don't think, but we're not looking at, what percentage people are falling in a certain category. We're saying whatever our percentage is overall, we're expecting a 2% increase overall. And then we're also looking at it from a site level. And we're looking at that for ELA and we're looking at that for math. And we've said also a 5% increase from the baseline for each subgroup. Right, and so that's how we're holding ourselves accountable. So can you show me how we're looking at this? Because I'm not sure I'm understanding.
Okay, so this is a 3-year plan for the next 3 years. So we start at 22, 23, because that's our baseline. And
Okay.
then we continue on that. If you want the actual, like, from last year, then you do have to go back to the annual update, which is the document before that. And is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, because the question is, right, is are our test scores improving or not?
Okay. Can you go back to the other document that you had at the first one? Yeah, there you go. Perfect, yes. And then scroll down to the annual update, which after these 4 pages is the next one. Oops, yeah, keep going. You're going the wrong way, but yeah, you got you. You keep going. You're doing great. Mhm. There you go. Okay, so, thank you. You can stop there. So this is from last year's LCAP, which is a 3-year, okay?
Okay, and what page, sorry?
Oh, this is on page 2 of the annual update.
Okay. Right here. Okay. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, great.
That does help. Thank you. And so if you'll notice that the baseline for the SBAC in math was in the year 1819, because with COVID, that was the last year that it was reported. And then the dashboard was taken down during the COVID years. And then we have 21, 22. And so we did have, it went from 39.7%. It did decrease because we just came out of COVID, the pandemic. So that's 37.35. And then in 2022, 23, it did decrease again. And yes, slightly. And so we don't have the 23, 24 data yet, obviously.
Right.
The way that we set the metrics up.
And I'm sorry, just to key to
Yeah.
emphasize here, is each year, rather than seeing a 2% increase, we're seeing a 2% decrease. And understand that COVID has interacted, but we're now getting out of COVID.
Correct.
And so I'm hopeful that we're going to see,
Yes.
some good improvement when it comes to September.
Right, and so that was the reason for the new plan, is to see what we can do in order to increase instead of keep decreasing. And agreed, everybody on this whole district has agreed with that. And to then point out one of the questions that we had last week was, are these programs working? Well, the new decree from this California Department of Education for the new LCAPs, which is ours is new, so it starts, this is year 1, next year of a 3-year plan, is that every 3 years that the LCAP has to, these matrices, has to provide an increase. And if they don't, then after 3 years, they need to be revised or they need to be replaced.
What needs to be revised?
The goal, either the goals or the action plans. It depends. So every single part of the action plan has a metric in order to judge its effectiveness and fight through data. And so if the data does not increase, then we, as a district, have the, through fidelity, we have to then change the action plan or the goal.
And that's every 3 years?
Correct.
Okay.
But this annual update, you'll see, it is by law that we do have to do a mid-year report every single year. So every single year we do a mid-year report, and if you'll scroll down, I mean, you don't have to, but like, for example, the iReady scores and everything is based on winter because that's the mid-year. And so that is what our data will be, what we'll be looking at for data. Okay.
Jones, you have a question?
So ideally, as I'm looking at, I'm just going to take the first one of math SBAC, and we go from the baseline of almost 40% down to 30, I'm going to round to half points, to 37.5, then we go to 35, then, so ideally, we would love to see ourselves get above 40% for 23, 24.
Correct.
Okay.
But in the new LCAP, in 3 years, we want it to have above 50.
Right, right, but I'm just saying, in order to just kind of fill in the hope for year three's outcome, I mean, we've got our desire that we'd like to be up at 55%. Likelihood of that, it maybe is not real strong, but ideally, we'd love to get above that base where we were from 18, 19 and hit the 40% plus category in order to get closer to what we had originally projected as our outcome. If we don't get to that 55%, that is when we would, so here's my question, that is when we would evaluate what we're doing to say we need to increase or we need to change this to tweak it in order to get those percentages that we want. Is that correct?
Well, when the LCAP was written, 55% was a value, it was a target we could
Right,
hit.
it was a
And
target.
so in the new LCAP, it has been reduced to 50 because we appreciate wanting to exceed expectations, but we also want to make them reasonable goals.
Right, okay.
And so we don't have to hit 50, but we do have to show progress.
Progress.
And so, as President Hill has pointed out, it should be at least 2%. You know what I'm saying? In order to align with our strategic district goals.
And ideally, yeah, and ideally 2% above the 39 and a half
Correct.
versus, or the 40 versus the 35.
Correct.
Yeah.
And again, with the local indicators, we have the things in place. We didn't have already in place, but now we do. Just things of that nature.
Yeah.
And so, every year we get better at, what is it that we need, and then we do try to, put that in, and based on what we can do. And so they're there. We just have to then work the program. Question? Okay. And then, so each one of so again, this is the annual update, but in the new LCAP, we have aligned the board goals, and we have put in the matrices. And I would like to just read the verbiage from the California Department of Education. It says, modifying ineffective actions after 3 years. Any actions deemed ineffective over 3 years of the plan will need to be modified or eliminated within the next 3-year LCAP cycle. So that was put in. And so, we just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. It's just not a continue of what we've always done. Okay. Are there any other questions that I could answer?
Questions from the board? Member Thomas? Do we
No
know-
questions, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Pachowski. I know it was a Herculean task, so maybe
Thank you
that's,
for
maybe
the
that's.
experience. I
maybe that's-
appreciate it.
Okay. Right, well,
It looks so amazing.
So the saying, right, is that which does not kill us makes us stronger.
Yep, it
So-
almost killed me, but I am stronger,
All
so
right.
I do
Excellent.
appreciate
There we
that.
go.
Like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. I wouldn't have gotten it otherwise, and I learned the learning curve was extremely steep over 8 weeks, but I have learned a lot, and I have connected with a lot of people, and so I do appreciate it. I honestly do, from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you for the great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to 9.2, 24-25 budget adoption resolution. And we don't need to read this, do we?
I think
There's an action for 9.1?
It's an action. 9.2.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry,
9.1.
I'm sorry, we have to vote on it. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the LCAP?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, so all in favor? I'm sorry, we should do a roll call.
Member Thomas,
Yes,
Member Nguyen,
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent, Vice President Jones,
Yes.
President Hill.
Yes, Okay, motion carries. LCAP is adopted. Okay, great. Okay, so moving on to 9.2, budget adoption. So recommendation is the Board of Education adopt the 24-25 budget resolution and the public hearing reserve disclosure certificate and certify that the budget was developed using the state adopted criteria and standards. So are there any questions or comments from the board before we take an action on this? Okay. One request that I have is that when we did put the most recent budget together, remember when had noted in the last meeting that we were using this unassigned category and always feel uncomfortable in using those kinds of categories because that's where, I mean, there's just a lack of transparency. And so I would appreciate, going forward that we try to parse these things out, as we do future revisions of the budget. Any other questions, comments? Superintendent?
Yeah, I just want clarification. Are you referring to the designated certain funds, or are you referring to the, I just want to make sure I know what section you're referring to.
I'm assuming you're referring to like page 23 of the budget book. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so that's the designated certain funds, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so those funds, and by the way, this term is actually something that is a state term that's used. It's not something that we created. But it actually is the additional money that we have that's still remaining in our budget that's beyond.
That is correct, but generally in prior budgets, we never, all of the money has been reallocated to all the funds, and so there was never anything, the line item for unassigned has always been zero in the past that I've been on the board. So like when I see that there's an unassigned of a negative $8 million, that is a red flag to me. And I'm thinking the same for Member Hill and I just want to know, like, basically, and then my question was last time was, how did we come up with that money, like, for an unassigned amount, based on the end fund balance? And how did you all determine that there's going to be an $8 million of unassigned funds? Because that adds to our deficit.
Just as a point of relevance, that this does not commit the board to these. These are just unassigned to these categories, and it would require board action to move these into these or do something with them. So,
Correct.
yes, so this is not permanently assigning these to anything. These are just budgeted items for potential. And again, the board would end up approving any expenditures. So these are not expended, these are unassigned, which means they're not yet.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if we look at 23-24, so we're saying that we have 6.7 million in unassigned. And so what we're saying is that in essence, that's kind of a piggy bank that's not being committed to anything, but that we're using this to cover our structural deficit. And so if you then move into the following year, right? So there's a decrement, and so then you see that in the following year, the piggy bank goes down to 3.2, and then by 25-26 it's at zero, and then at 26-27 it's negative. And the only reason it's showing up as negative is because, well, that's just a weird accounting, right? I mean, I think that it's not so much that the unassigned is negative, it's that we're
Deficit spending.
right.
That is absolutely correct, but I would rather see that in the end fund balance than they're sitting there as unassigned. So, like for me, then I have no questions. I know that we're deficit spending. But when it's sitting there as unassigned, I'm saying, hey, like there's a possibility that we are going to be allocating additional monies, and spend even more. So initially, when you look at it, it doesn't look that great. But I understand the whole process of what it is that you're trying to convey.
Yeah, and so maybe when we take a second stab at this, if we can just look
I
at
may
some
suggest,
different.
certainly one big update to the board is that first interim. And so certainly, I think that's probably the right opportunity for the board then to revise this plan. And I think why that might be a good plan, because we need to start our budget continued discussions, and this could, everything has to be kind of on the table for discussion, including this, and then the board could then update it first interim.
Yeah, because honestly, like, for me, I would just feel like, okay, the unassigned, you should just put it into the general fund. Like, why isn't it in the general fund, right? So,
I think one of the things one of the thoughts is that these are some things that have to get done, that if, for example, facilities improvements, that if a bond is not passed, so if a bond is passed, then this becomes irrelevant, right?
yeah, but you
So,
can
but
always.
if it's not, but if it's not passed, if we assign this money somewhere else in the budget, and where is it going to be assigned that we could necessarily take it from that? So I think we're suggesting that we're seeing these as possibilities of things, expenses that are going to be necessary. Now, whether they fall into line with these or not, we'll have to see. And it would change, say, at first interim, because let's say the bond passes. Well, then you're going to obviously have some
Exactly.
major changes here and some of that as well. So I think it's kind of,
Actually, maybe another way to look at this is I think at one point the district had a much larger reserve, right? And so within that reserve, when you look at your actual overall budget that you receive, if you're living within your budget, which is one of the measures that you asked us to do, is to make sure that, A, we're living within our budget, because you can't take on long-term commitments if you're not living within your budget. So these dollars actually live outside of our actual accounts that we actually receive, is our funding for this coming year inside the budget. So the way how I think I look at it, and I think the way how the state looks at it, is that you do need to go off and figure out, like, if you aren't going to be committed to these particular items that we have on there, and these are all necessary things. Technology refresh isn't even inside of our regular budget. We have very little money actually allocated, not nearly enough money, right? Again, as you continue to right-size everything that you're doing, some of these things will actually become more important inside the budget. Technology refresh for sure will become more important because we know that we need to do more integration. Our curriculum's tied to it. Our system that we have currently right now is antiquated. We need to update it. Plus, we also have to do all the recycle and refresh things that go with it. The other areas that are in there is we actually set aside the money for textbook commitments. Is we sit there and we build that account up when those adoptions come, right? So we actually kind of have like a savings plan that kind of happens with this, that we're making sure that money is set aside. So even though we don't spend it, what we don't want to do is we don't want the public to have a false understanding that that money is something that we're not spending for this year, but instead we're actually saving. So that's another piece too that you can sit there and kind of look at this with it.
Okay, and I don't know if we're constrained in terms of the vocabulary that we use, but unassigned just I don't know. It's confusing.
It is a state,
I think
state term that you
Okay.
have to use, and so
Okay,
we're
that's fine.
required to use that term. It's
Okay.
probably a term that's probably not, as accurate to their thing. It's not saying you're unassigning it, you're just,
Right.
you're budgeting it for these categories, is what you're doing.
Right.
We're kind of budgeting these categories.
It's your
You just haven't
reserves.
assigned it to a particular budget code, that's all.
Yeah.
So you are budgeting these are being budgeted, it's in the
Yeah.
budget.
Okay. Okay. All right, so can I get a motion to approve the budget adoption resolution?
I'll make a motion to adopt.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so Member Jones moves, Member Thomas seconds. Can we do a roll call vote, Ms. Lemus, please?
Yes. Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
President Hill?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, moving on to resolution 9.3, resolution 2324, designating certain general funds as committed fund balance for 24-25. Any questions from the board on this? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion.
Member Jones moves.
Second.
Member Nguyen seconds. Ms. Lemus, roll call, please.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
President Hill.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Moving on, we've pulled item 9.4, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. We'll be bringing that back. And then 9.5, bid award, Newark Memorial High School track and field project to O.C. Jones and Sons. Superintendent?
Actually, I'm going to turn this over to Bill Oline, our consultant for business, who oversaw this particular bid amount.
So two things for you. First, a slight correction under the agenda item details. The dollar amount there says 4422 and it has 222. It's supposed to be 000. And in the background and the attachments are correct. It was just typed wrong on the agenda item details. The second thing I would point out to you.
Sorry, Mr. Oling, can you repeat that one more time?
Yes, so under the agenda item details,
Right.
there's a dollar amount. It should say 4422000 in that spot. In the background and the attachments, they are correct. It just got typed wrong here at this section. The other thing I would point out is that if you notice that the budget overall, remember last week we had the board approve the materials through CMAS. This is the approval of the installation. This project is, as the board has seen before, and as the site desires for it. So this is meeting all the requirements for that you've seen. We were able to get it to a budget that's below the $6 million, which was the original intent, and that was by really sharpening our specs and how we put the bid together.
6.9, right? It was 6.9.
6.9. So this is 5.6. So I feel like we've done well. As far as the start time, working with the site, their desire. After talking with the coaches, their desire is to start after the second home game, which would be this September 23rd. So our plan right at this point, unless there's some change from the site, is to have workers, we might mobilize before then, maybe stage stuff that's not out of the way, and then start, our goal maybe start that day as far as actual work. So any questions about this?
Questions from the board? Member Thomas, Member Jones?
I was going to say, since we're starting third week of September,
Yes.
and that was after the kind of the original push, we've pushed it a little bit more so that we can have a couple games here. Is that the gist of it?
Yes, so as we talked to the athletic director, we were willing to go and start whenever, as soon as we can mobilize. But they chose that they thought the first and second home games would be the best for them. It does not, delays it slightly, obviously, instead of starting that way, but it's no impact for graduation, no impact, but I mean, obviously the fall is under construction and probably around the January timeframe, you're starting to finish up and button up and punch list. It would vary based upon weather. So, if it's super, super rainy, that might hurt a little bit, but yeah, that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Member Thomas, any questions?
No, I'm fine.
Great. Okay, Member Wen? Okay, can I get a motion to approve 9.5 bid award to O.C. Jones?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second.
Member Jones moves, Member Thomas seconds. Roll call vote, Ms. Lemus?
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
And President Hill.
Yes. Okay. Motion carries. Moving on to 9.6.
Before you move on, may I make just a brief comment on that particular item? Just to kind of note with the board and the community, I think this is one of the important areas that we really did note inside of our budget, that if we do some of our procurement things in a different way, it will have an extremely positive result on many of our budget items. This is a real clear example of using purchasing powers that we have available to us, but it does take somebody who's an expert and understands how to do those kinds of services. We had an expert that was working on this. The nice thing is we actually now have some new protocols in place that we can use to go along with this for the future. And as a result, we have almost a $1.3 million savings.
So, I mean, part of that was just a real intentionality. We do have a team together that are probably A players for this project. Construction manager, the architect, purchasing assistant that's helping us with that. So this is a good illustration because when you start looking at things, it's not even, you didn't even change the scope. We're not like changing the colors or anything. We're just looking at the specs and going, okay, well, how tight can you put them? Because you sit there and say, if you say a nail, well, what type of nail? You know, that kind of thing. You know, as you get the more specific you get, the more better prices you're going to get. But that requires intentionality. So, but this is exactly, yeah. So I think that's a great point to point out that this is a good example of why a purchasing procurement type person will be effective, because I think this shows that, you know, we're able to, you know, do good.
But one thing, and I know that you all are keeping your eye on the ball here, but, you know, negotiating a good contract up front with a good vendor is super important. But then the management of that is super important
Right,
as well.
so we
Both
have.
things are-
Right, and so that's why it's very important to us to have that team in place to manage at the end. So we have a whole, frankly, whoever comes in, this could be a system for all these projects that's going to be kind of self-running a little bit. We've got a process in place for you guys.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on to 9.6, audit discussion, stipends, and substitute time. And do we want to let Member Thomas speak to this?
Absolutely. Excuse me, sorry about that. Member Thomas had brought this item forward. We've had a discussion, both Member Thomas and myself, with regards to this. This is also a topic that was brought up at the audit meeting. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Member Thomas to share with you some of the concerns that came from this, and then we can talk a little bit about future timelines for us to be able to do a deeper dive into all these items.
Member Thomas?
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, I really appreciate this opportunity to present and discuss the data regarding stipends and substitute payments. First, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Cindy Parks because she shared her CPR data with me, and Kerry Newt took that data and he put it into a list that we can look according to the type of the stipend. I shared this data with the superintendent, as she mentioned, and I look forward to her responses and recommendations for next steps. It's really important, I think, that all stipends be documented and that they be board approved before any payment is processed. Last year's stipends totaled over $300,000, and over 1/3 of that was for athletics. And if you look at athletics, it has become more complicated since longevity factors and stipends have been added. So after 2, 5, or 8 years in the same sport, coaches get more money, and it's also different depending on their level, whether they're varsity, head JV, assistant varsities, and so forth. So it seems to me that payroll really must be able to verify that these payments are approved and that they have a list of coaches, their level, the sport grouping they're in, and their longevity in their sport. All of these things impact the stipend that they're going to receive. And so they're going to be all over the place, and we have to have those lists approved so that payroll knows that they're paying the right amount. Likewise, just as department chair, that the athletic stipends have become more complicated, so have department chairs' stipends. They've totaled $35,548 last year. So instead of one rate for department chairs, now their standards are given based on a base rate. I think it's $1,800, and they get $60 for each section that they oversee. So I'm wondering, how is the number of sections determined and verified? Is there a report off of the master schedule that is provided? Are there courses assigned to departments based on their location in the course catalog or on their quote A through G designations? The stipends are listed in the NTA collective bargaining agreement, and they include an electives share. Well, if you put most of the courses, including some G courses like economics, into the department where they belong, there are very few electives like leadership maybe and APEX courses. So is there an electives chair, and who is it, and what subjects are covered in electives. So that might be something in the collective bargaining agreement, or to be clarified if there is indeed an electives department chair. Science education stipends were given for 10 teachers, and they were processed last year at $600 each. I don't know what these are for. I didn't see them in the CBA, although they might be there. One person received $1,200. It's not clear that these have been approved or that we know what they're for. A big area of concern is teacher induction mentor stipends. They total $40,930. So there's 18 teachers receiving stipends, and these range all over the place from $5,365 to less than $1,500. The budget documents I have seen provide standard stipends for each inductee mentors. So I'm wondering why all these various amounts for induction mentors, and I'd like to see us knowing what they are, and that payroll has the information they need to appropriately pay these stipends. So there's other stipends, other than the ones I've mentioned, that total over $75,000. And they may be in the CBA, or I don't know if some of them are in the LCAP, or they need to be approved by some action, but it's not clear if they are all documented and if they're all approved. There were 2 ELOP stipends for about $10,000 each. There were 3 extended learning instructional stipends for $500 each. There was a $1,950 stipend for school merger. There were 50 various stipends for special ed, totaling $3,000. There was one stipend for $5,000, and it was just listed as, quote, stipend. And then there were STEAM stipend. There was a STEAM stipend for $10,000. I think I know what that's for, but I don't know that it was ever board approved. So there is a case where $800 stipends for DLI teachers are listed in the CBA, but it does not appear that all DLI teachers receive these. So not only are there some stipends that we're questioning whether they were approved, there are other stipends that maybe should have been approved and given that maybe weren't. I'm just wondering. So finally, a guest teacher reportedly had been paid $403 per day as a long-term substitute. However, there are only 2 approved subrates. One is $235 per day daily, or $270 for a long-term substitute. So I guess in closing, I just want our stipend and our substitute teacher rates to be transparent and equitably administered, and all should be board approved. So to the extent that they may not be, I'm wondering, Superintendent, what the next steps action should be that are taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Thomas. We want to thank you for your work and the work that was done to look at some of the considerations of this. I think this is kind of a deeper dive in how we help and support the staff members who do a really great job, right, in doing the extra performance work. So we want to thank them for their work, but we also want to make sure that there's some consistencies that are done and that there is a process that's really clear. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Chris Williams.
Thank you so much. So the contract is the baseline of what our allocations are. So we look at the contract, and then we'll do by site, just like we do staffing ratios. But I would recommend that we come back with our overall stipend list at one time for the board so that you guys can see where it is. There are some inconsistencies on amounts and numbers. And then there's also longevity stipend if teachers are actually subbing and they're retired. So they actually get a $300 stipend per month in addition to their daily rate, which is a cost. And Bill and I have actually been working on getting a breakdown on every sub cost, what category it falls into, so that we can present that information, and then we can start planning strategically on what we can do to reduce that number. But it comes down to this, right? When you have highly qualified teachers in the classroom, you're going to decrease your sub cost, number one, right? Also, the things that we talked about last week on what our protocols are and processes are for administrative leave, anything that you deal with, Family Medical Leave Act, whatever it might be. There's some things you have flexibility on how you can tighten that timeline up so we don't have as many sub days. And then currently with each of the sites, and we can break this down, it'll be a little deeper dive, we haven't got into the stipends yet. But currently there's an allocation provided by sites that are worked through by the principal secretary and then provided based on the collective bargaining agreement. And those are the stipend amounts that they receive on there. So it may need to be discussed about collective bargaining agreement, whether the stipends are the right amount. I don't know the last time they've been increased, decreased, eliminated. And I can guarantee there's probably a few of them out there that aren't in the collective bargaining agreement that we've done based on past practice. And we need to look at those so we can assess and evaluate those. But again, the CBA, when it's negotiated and approved by the board, you are approving those stipend amounts for our staff members to have those based on the allocations on that contract language. Does that make sense? So same thing when we have a 24-to-1 class size, like for teachers, we know every 48 students, it's gonna cost us 2 FTEs, right? We know we have 1 varsity football head coach, we know we have 1 JV head coach, 1, whatever the grade levels are, and you break it down so you have it allocated per team, per sport, and per amount, and then it's signed off. And there's actually should be, and this is one of the things we did find out, I'm actually meeting with the athletic director next week, legally, the piece that we're missing are temporary contracts for each of your coaches. So when a contract is actually signed by a temporary coach, it provides you flexibility for progressive discipline if you have any acts, or if you have a coach that's doing a great job too, you want to be able to affirm them with postseason evaluation and follow-up, which we haven't been able to do yet. But we want to be able to take that, so we're honoring the work our teachers are doing as well as our classified, but also doing it with a budget. So like when Bill's doing the budget, he and I know that there's not going to be any more cost than whatever that set amount is. And if we get to that threshold, then we have to come back and discuss it, just like we'll start doing with the RFPs. So example, when you're doing a request for personnel, Tracy and I just talked about this today. What happens is we get a number of requests for personnel coming in daily, and it goes to a doc, RFP docs. It goes to the finance team. There's 2 signatures there. Then it gets sent over to me for my approval. So I look at the position number, budget, make sure it's within the collective bargaining agreement. I sign it, then it goes back to Bill for final authorization. Once that's signed off, then it gets posted, right? We don't have that process in place for our coaching stipends, but it's very easy to do. Very simple. So I think the 2 main points is being transparent about how much we're paying, who we're paying for what services they're doing, right? And then making sure we honor our collective bargaining agreement. That is why that is there. It's our guideline and Bible to make it through this. And then training. So example, when you have 6 principals that are interims and you don't have a principal secretary, we need to have a backup plan on training our principal secretaries as well as our new principals on how all of that process works. Because if not, you're going to be fumbling and juggling and we're going to miss things. And that's the protocol we have to have in place and the structure as we move forward. Guys, it's really easy, but it takes a lot of time. Okay, so we can report back on that and provide more information. And I think it's a very powerful tool for us too, so you guys know what's being spent and where. So hopefully that helps out.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions?
Sure.
No, just a comment. I agree that, it's a good idea to have a list of the stipends for us to review, but as a board, we can't approve every stipend that's gonna come. And as long as the payments follow the law and
Absolutely.
honor the CBA, then that's should be enough.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, and I appreciate that.
What, and
I just had one question, just because it was one of my little pet projects for the most part. E3 stipends for peer coaches, are we still using peer coaches? Because Nancy didn't, or Member Thomas didn't mention anything about that particular stipend, but I know that it has been in the past.
It is a negotiated stipend.
Right.
That's part of the collective bargaining agreement. We have to look at a deeper level on how effective that's been and whether it's still being maintained for the upcoming years.
Right.
So, yeah.
Also, in some cases, I think some stipends may have been replaced inside the LCAP itself.
That's correct.
Where they came up with a stipend amount that was in there that may not be part of the CBA or may not have been maybe updated within our records as well. And so we want to make sure that those things actually do have a process, as Chris said. Those are really important elements for us to be able to do that deeper dive work, ensure that our, eyes are dotted, T's are crossed.
So, let me make sure I'm understanding this. So are we saying that all stipends, period, the end, are first codified in the CBA?
They should be codified in the CBA, right? The ones that we're aware of, that we're supporting and endorsing from a district and a board standpoint, yes. The ones that we have to look at, if there's anything that's abnormal, you know, if there's a $5,000 one here and a $10,000 one here that's not in the collective bargaining agreement, I'm sure there's a history of why that's there, whether it was in the LCAP or somewhere else. Those should not be granted and approved unless collectively bargained with the collective bargaining team, so that we have it ratified within the collective bargaining agreement, we're all on the same page with it.
Because it seems to me that we've been running fast and loose in this category, and it seems to me that there are some, some people making executive decisions above their pay grade to allocate one-off stipends, which technically are not, we shouldn't even be paying. And my sense is that we need to try to bring everything back, and that we need to have a formal policy around this, right? And there should be a formal policy, and there should be formal steps and a workflow, and it shouldn't be based on personality or who likes who, right? It should be a standard, because I will tell you that, like in the district where I work, so I get I get a stipend, but it's established per a specific policy, and the only way that I will get that stipend is if I fall under that policy, right? And so it's not that I just negotiate a side agreement with the principal or whoever, right? And so, but I think that the only way that we're going to get the horse back in the barn around this is to say, because do we have a written policy around this? Do we know?
We have the collective bargaining agreement that provides the details of what's being paid, and then the internal process is just like payment or payroll.
Okay,
right?
But other than that, there's no documentation around the stipend.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so I think that would be an action that we should take, you know, so that it's very, very clear and it's very neutral, and so nobody, and people can understand in advance whether they're eligible or not, and there's no surprises to payroll. You know, everything is kind of above board.
Yeah, and one other thing, just to say, highly effective organizations with stipends, which is every school district in California, they actually provide contracts and job descriptions. That's how far we are behind. So you have a head coaching job, you have a job description. And then when you get to the next level, you have an evaluation tool, which has to be negotiated, right? But those things, we don't have job descriptions on every one of these, is what causes people to come in and say, hey, Principal A, good intentions, but I'm doing all these extra duties. Is there a way I can get a stipend? And then the principal says, yeah, sure, or no, because they're not following the collective bargaining agreement. And that's where you get unfair labor practices. And we don't want to negotiate away from the table. We want to negotiate at the table with our teachers and classified, so that we're all working together collaboratively, and then providing that process on how it works. Right?
But what I would say,
Yeah.
I mean, and you have more experience in this area than I do, but I can see how in a coaching position that you would have that codified in the person's contract, because that really is a big part of their job. In my situation, so I'm a business teacher, but I'm leading the Future Business Leaders of America program, but it's not a part of my job description. And so I can either decide to do it or not do it, but if I decide to do it, they have classified that type of role as, you know, this is the level of stipend that you will get for doing this kind of work. Absolutely. And so I think I'm sure that there will be one-off is the wrong term, but non-contractual scenarios where a stipend needs to be paid, but it will still fall within a certain definition, and it should follow through with a certain process to say, this person is now taking on this, you know, this request needs to be put in, this person needs to approve it, this now, you know, if the board needs to ratify it, the board needs to ratify it, and then ultimately then it gets sent to payroll to process.
Sure.
Can I?
Go ahead, Member Thomas.
Okay, thanks. Getting back to what Member Jones said about the peer coaches, If you go to the CBA, you will see that the peer coach's job description is very, very extensive. And so I think to do the mention of having job descriptions for these stipends, I think that's extremely important. And I'd especially hope that you could make a comment, any one of you, about the stipends that the inductee mentors get, because they're all over the place and they make no sense to me. And I've seen budgets in the past, and the stipend is calculated at the number or the stipend amount based on the number of inductees and an amount for each member, each mentor per inductee, and they add that up. And now you have these numbers all over the place, and they're odd numbers. And then besides that, on some of the other stipends, there's instead of $500, it's $499.99, or $504.04. And so some of that stuff in the list that I was working off of. But I really would like to know about these inductee mentor stipends.
Okay, thank you. Message heard, and we'll do some work on this.
And could since this is an agenda item, is it action? It is action. I'd like to request, if the board is in agreement, that we put a request into the superintendent to deputize somebody to look into the stipend situation and to come up with a set of proper policies and an implementation plan. And also, as Member Thomas. Yeah, exactly. And also, as Member Thomas is identify these loose ends that are not falling within our new policy and get them rectified. But before I ask the board whether they'd be willing to support this, I understand, Superintendent, that you and your staff have a lot of work on your plate, and so I don't think that this needs to be something that needs to happen tomorrow. But if we were to make that kind of request, what do you think would be a reasonable time frame to try to pull at least a draft together and review it with the board?
Are you asking me or this?
No, she was asking me. I was thinking about that. So I would say probably around October or November, realistically. Our first priority right now truly is to get staff hired and on board. We also are working on some other systems of real importance, and you all are going to be making some very big decisions coming up here in the near future that are going to have an impact on our timelines, potentially for August through November, especially if we move forward with the bond. So in thinking about that, I would say probably end of October, first part of November for first read.
So
we have in place for second semester.
With that input, so you're saying that you would start on it in November, or you would have something ready in November?
I think we could have something ready in November.
Okay. So with that, would the board be willing to support an action asking the superintendent and staff to pull together a draft policy around this?
I'm a no, just because if we are diligent about making sure that there's lists for the stipend and that it is in their job descriptions that they get certain stipends and it follows the CBA, I think that's good enough for staff to go back and rework or look at those, review those, and see where we're missing and then implement the changes. I don't necessarily think that, we need a official policy to be able to, make this happen. I have faith in our staff that they're going to make those changes and have them completed and report out on it to the board. So that's my input.
Member Jones?
I'm going to kind of pick the middle ground on this and say, some of it is in the CBA. So understanding what is in the CBA and what is not, and what would be the recommendations for the ones that are not. So yes, it would take some evaluation because it's checking things against the CBA, but it would be good to know what's in there and what isn't, and then how do we move forward from there? And I think that's kind of to me, that seems a little bit of a middle ground rather than coming up with a whole big thing, just doing that checking and saying, this is, oh wow, we noticed this one got 10,000 and this one got 5,000, but wasn't it the same job? Being able to kind of evaluate what's happened and come to us, but not reinventing the wheel when it comes to it already being in the CBA.
If I may, and I know I don't have a vote on this particular piece of it, but something maybe to think about is that I think this is about systems. And one of the things that we noted earlier is that we think that we are lacking some systems, that if we put those systems in place, that we could have a cleanup piece on this. I mean, we know annually we're going to have stipends, right? To me, it might be as simple as coming up with a document by site that lists those different stipends, and then we know whose name goes with them, and it's already pre-populated with the dollar amount, right? And so then that action comes back and becomes an action to the board. It may just be a cleanup piece that we just need to take care of. And it may not be a policy at all that needs to be done, but perhaps an internal process of how we go about doing our business, no different than approving like a personnel request that we might be doing.
And if
Member
I can
Thomas?
clarify, I'm sorry. I just wanted to highlight that is the process now at the sites. So those of you that have worked at school sites, the principal, secretary, principal has the list. It's broken down by name, stipend, and stipend amount. Those get approved, and that's what's processed through. Now, is it consistent all the way around? Because I just looked at it with athletics. They're in line, but I haven't looked at every stipend. So there's a process. It's just not consistent, and it's, remember, structures and systems lead to student success and student achievement, right? So we got to get the structure and system in place so it's consistent.
Member Thomas?
No, I'm fine. I just think these are important things for us to make sure we're getting it right, that we're paying everyone that deserves a stipend, and that we're paying them the right amount.
By the way, we're going to have stipends that are going to come up here real soon because we're going to have staff that's going to want their funds to be able to perform certain services. So we're going to have to sit there and really look at it and evaluate it. And I think if there is a necessity for a policy, if you would give staff the opportunity to be able to come back and let you know that it needs to be a policy versus it needs to be a practice.
Yeah, and the reason why, I think this is important is, I mean, as Member Thomas has pointed out, there are financial impacts to this. Now, you can argue that, okay, it's not $2 million or whatever, but who knows? It could be bigger than we think, and over time it can add up. But I think also what's important is that if we can get bulletproof processes in place that are then, and by the way, it starts with the process and then it gets implemented in a system, right? But you first need to make sure that you've defined the process. Then, like, you can take that off of the plate because, we're here now at 9:10 in the evening, and I think that our goal is to try to stop extending our meetings until 12 midnight. And so the fewer things that we have to discuss, the better, right? And the way that you get there is by automating certain processes, so it's a no-brainer.
I almost started clapping. I'm sorry. Yeah.
They still want to vote with you.
What?
You guys, honestly, I promise you, this is not a huge task, okay? Just give us time. I hear
Okay.
you, and we'll work closely together. Again, you're not talking of a substantial number, but it's the structure and system like you're talking about, and having consistency, and having a dollar amount, so it's
Agreed.
within our budget too.
Great. Member Thomas, did you want to add anything before we move on?
No, thank you to the staff for agreeing to do a deep dive into this and make sure we do everything right.
Actually, we want to thank you too for bringing this to our attention and for the great work that was done in the analysis, right? That gave us some systems to start looking at. I think that will go a long way for helping us all move forward.
Member Jones, did you have one final comment?
I just want to say that I think some of this comes from the fact that there has been in the past willy-nilly stipends handed out. And that's what we're trying to, we really want to, firm up what should happen and what shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Great conversation.
Great. Okay, so moving on to 9.7, healthy use of technology for students. Superintendent?
Yes, this is
this is what I...
This is your item, but I'm happy to introduce it if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. So there's been a very interesting movement going on across the country, and it really centers around the use of student cell phones on campuses. Now, this is not a new topic. It happened back in the 90s when I was teaching. I can assure you that this has been a long time conversation, but more importantly, it's talked about whether or not students are able to really stay focused. So LA Unified School District has recently adopted a resolution that they are looking to ban cell phone use here at their district starting in January. It's a really interesting piece, and it comes with a lot of brain science behind it, which is really interesting. And I know I had a really great discussion with President Hill on this very topic because we are concerned about students and the use of making sure that they have access, one, to good technology that's around the instructional services, but that the other stuff that distracts them and prevents them from being able to really focus in on what they need to, that is a concern I think that we all have, especially when we look at student achievement. And with that, I'll turn it over to President Hill.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I saw this press release, and LA Unified's the largest school district in our state, correct? Yeah, so here this is something where they've actually they've passed a resolution around this. And they're sort of on the leading edge. Governor Newsom is very concerned about this. And I think that there's a couple of different angles to it. So one is, as Superintendent Vaccaro stated, that anybody who's in the classroom sees on a daily basis the challenges of cell phones. And they are a serious distraction. And as Superintendent Vaccaro stated, and I learned this when I went through San Jose State's teacher certification process not that long ago, 4 years ago, and had a great professor, and they were talking about brain science and how people learn, and they've done sort of an analysis of the stages of knowledge acquisition. And one of the things that they've determined is that no knowledge acquisition happens until you actually have the person paying attention. And so the subsequent stages that you go through where you're hearing input, you're weighing stuff, and then ultimately you're formulating some idea, and then it goes into long-term storage retrieval, none of that happens until you actually have the person focusing on the topic at hand. And I can tell you that was the minute that kids in my class break out the cell phones, they're not listening. And so there is no knowledge acquisition that's happening. And I think that there's that aspect. I think that where Governor Newsom is coming from is there's also another whole basic mental health issue where there's cyberbullying going on. There's other things going on that, again, really affect kids' self-worth and productivity. And so, and also there's other scientists that are out there studying this from a very objective standpoint, saying, this is a new phenomenon in society, and we're now only really realizing some of the detrimental impacts. And so the wave is building at this point. I think that we as a district, it behooves us to start preparing for this. And I don't think that we need to take any knee-jerk reactions, but what I would like to suggest, and this is why I brought it up to the superintendent, is that maybe this is something that we discuss a little bit during our board retreat, and maybe we also have a more detailed discussion and maybe a study session in the fall when we return, and we talk about, based on input from various stakeholders, whether we want to adopt a policy and what that might look like. But this was really just the starting of a conversation, and so wanted to throw it out to my fellow board members for their thoughts. Member Wen, do you have any input on this topic?
There's been a bill passed a long time ago, several years ago, that says that the board has the direction to ban cell phones in the classroom. It's just whether or not we as a board agree to do that and put a policy in place. And I know in the past that we haven't, so that's all I have to say.
Member Jones?
I do think it is a discussion worth having, partly because We've gotten a number of parents that have emailed us this year about the bullying that's happening on social media, and that, kids are seeing that at school. It's not just that they're seeing it after school, but they're seeing it at school. And when, when you're the victim, so to speak, of cyberbullying, it's really hard to concentrate in class. I mean, your mind is completely elsewhere. You're in survival mode, and you can't learn in survival mode. So I do think it is really worth a conversation to have. I know, as a sixth grade teacher, I collected the kids' cell phones during the day. They didn't have a problem with it because they just learned after a week. That's just what Miss Jones did. And I never really got any flack from them about collecting them. So that tells me that if we start them young enough with not having the use during the day, that then it becomes like, oh, this is just what happens. So I think it's well worth having a discussion about it and maybe rolling it out.
Member Thomas, any input on this topic?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Just one other note for all of us to also take note and think about. I mean, technology is going to always be expanding, and it's up to us really to educate our own children and how we use it. We shouldn't be afraid of it, and we shouldn't 100% embrace it either, but at the same time, we need to find an innovative solution other than just trying to control and not live with, devices or vice versa. So my thing is that's just food for thought and how I see certain things. I'm not a proponent of thinking that ChatGPT is bad for students. As if you teach them how to use it wisely, it can be a great advantage, a great tool to be able to learn and to leverage education. But at the same time, so are cell phones, and so are tablets, so are computers. I mean, our kids are going to have devices regardless in the classroom. So it's how we teach them to use them and how we as teachers in the classroom set the expectations. I don't necessarily think that, taking everything away is the one-all solution. So that's my point.
And to Member Wen's point, there's, not a lot of people know this, but there is actually ed code that specifically permits the teacher to enforce any type of technology policies in class. And so unless there is some type of IEP or something that requires some specialized device, basically the teacher has the right to enforce. But I will tell you, as somebody who's in the trenches, and I think this is to Member Jones's point, because she was teaching younger kids, I'm teaching high school kids. The kids, I think, when they're younger, that they're maybe a little bit more pliable. As they've gotten into high school, quite frankly, my perspective is I'm witnessing addictive behavior. It's addiction. And I've tried multiple strategies in my class to address this. I mean, so first I've sort of said, well, it's the honor policy, put your phones away. Pretty quickly that disappears and kids are whipping out their phones. I've tried the education approach. So there's an excellent documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which I would highly recommend to everybody. And they actually interview the people here in Silicon Valley who have created both the equipment as well as social media, and they've talked about their intentional strategy to addict people. And it's multiple people. And so I've shown my kids this. They think, oh, that's interesting. A week later, they're whipping out their phones. I've tried the punitive, approach, which is, I'm gonna take you up to the principal. The challenge, though, is that the principals don't want to deal with it. They don't have the time. And so I'm kind of left with either, from the very beginning, I force everybody to put their phones in a phone cubby, or or I try to escalate, or I escalate it with the parents, but that becomes an enormous time sink as well. I can't be having multiple conversations. I have 150 kids. I call them direct reports, although they don't believe that they report to me. I have 150 kids. I cannot be meeting with 150 parents over cell phone violations. And right now as a teacher, I really feel actually kind of stranded where I feel like I have to fight the battle on the front lines. Whereas if there were a policy in place at our district which simply said, sorry, they're not allowed in the classroom. And by the way, my class is a business class, so we're using technology all the time. I'm having the kids use computers. But I give them very prescriptive instructions to say, okay, this is the time when we're going to sit and listen to a quick lecture. This is when we're going to go take notes. This is when we're going to take out our computers and we're going to work on Excel, or we're going to work on a presentation or whatever. And in my experience, there's nothing that you can't do on a computer that you can't also do on I'm sorry. There's nothing that you can't do on it, or that you can do on a cell phone that you can't also do on a computer. And so, almost anything the kids need to do. So,
There's a ton of apps that are awesome,
but not related to educational purposes.
no, related to educational purposes.
Okay. So, but anyway, I think that it's something that is going to improve potentially the learning environment if we look at this. And as you're saying, number one, I'm not proposing a ban, but I am proposing that we really think about guardrails that make sure that kids are focused in on the learning in hand and not on all these other distractions. Because literally, I mean, I tease them, and they recognize the addiction. If I let them, normally what I tell them is when they come into class, I remind them, put your cell phones away. And I used to just say, put them away. Now I say, put them in your backpack. And the reason, because I've seen that when they put them in their pocket, they have a subconscious habit where they're literally checking their phones every 10 minutes. And they're not even aware of it. And you can tell them, don't do that, but it's subconscious. It's addiction, right? And so it's something that is really serious and we need to address. So this is just the beginning of a conversation around this. Okay.
All right, thank you. Before we move on, could I just ask Ms. Lemus whether or not there was a motion taken on 9.6 in a second?
There was not a motion made on 9.6.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think we just asked you to look into it.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
So maybe everyone sitting out there before we had the discussion.
Yes, okay. Okay, so 9.8, board meeting date change for December.
Thank you. This is my item. And finding out that we have the California School Board Association Annual Conference coming up in December. We did not know about this date, probably last year at the time when the meeting dates had come about. And so I am requesting that because we will not have a quorum and there will be a need, because there's only one board meeting in November, for us to have an early meeting date to be able to do business, I am recommending that we come back together as a board on Monday, December 2nd, to take care of district business.
3rd.
No, I'm moving it from December 3rd to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
December
Okay, I
2nd.
got it. Any questions, comments from the board?
Just a reminder, it is an election year, so I know that generally the first meeting, that's when of December or 10 days after. I don't when the results are finalized, the new board sits in. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't conflict with the December 2nd date.
I did take a look at that. I went back to the election manual, and so they are estimating that we would have the certification dates at the end of that week.
Okay.
So we would have been meeting there anyways, and then we have so many days after that. And so I think the board did take a look at that, but they must have taken a look at that last year because they set the date appropriately for the second meeting, which made sense to me as to how they set that meeting.
Okay.
And that's where you're actually doing the board reorganization. So that did make sense.
Yeah, and we hit the last election, I think it was around the 15th or something, right, when we did that? Yeah.
This year, I believe it's scheduled for the 12th.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question. is it possible for us to save spaces early? Because Kath Jones and I missed out on the new board member orientation day because we didn't have our reservations in early. And I know they run out of space really quickly. Can we make placeholder or look into making placeholder reservations for any new board member so they can get that new board member training on the Wednesday?
So as soon as we know that we have new board members, we most certainly could do that, but it's unlikely that we're going to have board members in seats so when the annual conference happens, we will not have board certification results from the registrar's office at the time of
No,
this.
they're not, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but they're not required to have board certification in order to go to that training.
That's correct. We, basically, after their last election, we did allow incoming new board members prior to certification attend CSBA.
But we weren't able to get into the new board member
Yes.
workshop a day early. And that's, I think, what Nancy's talking about.
So maybe what we could do is if the superintendent could investigate. So we have three positions that are open. So we just assume worst case that nobody's, what? That's right. Nobody's going to get reelected, and we request 3 spots. Just being practical, right? And so we just request 3 spots, and then later on, if it turns out that we don't need them, we cancel them.
Yes and no. So I actually had a conversation today with CSBA, and we can continue this conversation when we meet on the 14th and 15th with CSBA. But one of the things I did ask about was about the pre-workshops and also the fact that there is a ethic training that is required of all board members and key cabinet members to attend once every 2 years. It's now
It's a law.
the legal requirement, right? So some of us are going to need to go take that training. You can only select one. As a placeholder right now, I actually have myself as a placeholder for new board member orientation, so that if we had to give up a seat, that would be available. So I did try to be thoughtful in thinking that out just a little bit, but there are other pre-sessions. Once you choose one, you can't choose a second one at the same time.
So one thing you might want to check on, last summer, when Member Thomas was President Thomas, we did have a summer session, and we brought in Lozano Smith, and we brought in Lou Lozano to do some training. And it is my recollection that he did give some training around ethics. Now, I don't know if that would qualify, but he would know, and so you could ask him. And if that already qualifies, we may have met that standard.
Okay, I will find out. Thank you for letting me know that. But either way, I think we need to be as proactive as possible. These seats do fill up quickly, as Board Member Thomas shared. I will tell you, housing filled up instantly. We do have some housing secured, and we're still waiting for one more housing reservation to come through. But we've been able to secure the majority of our housing reservations that we need during that time period. And then I will be reaching out to individual board members just so I can start putting placeholder reservations in place for those that I don't have information on yet.
Number 1, you have a question? Okay. Well, no need to, I don't think we need to make a decision right now, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about this item? Okay. And so I think you have direction.
To be able to move the meeting.
Do we
Yes.
have to make a motion and
Probably we do.
I would recommend that you do it just for,
Yeah, so can I get a motion to move the December 3rd meeting to December 2nd?
I'll make a motion to move December 3rd's meeting to December 2nd?
I'll second.
I'll second that.
Oh,
Okay. No, Member Wen beat you, Member Thomas. All right, so Member Jones moves, Member Wen seconds. Ms. Lemus, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
President Hill?
Yes, Motion carries. Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Do we want to pull any of the consent agenda items?
No, we're just amending the personnel report.
Yes, we've already amended that. So if there aren't any requests to pull anything, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Member Wen moves, Member Jones seconds. Ms. Lemus?
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
President Hill?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to 11 consent agenda non-personnel items. Are there any items that people would like to pull? It's up to you. Okay. Anything? Member Jones, Member Thomas?
Nope.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve on the consent agenda 11.2 through 11.7 and 11.9 through 11.25.
Okay, can we get a second?
I second.
Member Jones moves, Member Wen seconds.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Nguyen?
Yes.
Member Plancarte absent. Vice President Jones?
Yes.
President Hill?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to number 12, Board of Education Committee reports, announcements, requests, debriefing discussion. Member Thomas, would you like to go first?
Sure. I didn't prepare any comments, but I would like to say that I was impressed and pleased with the way the minutes were written up and put on the board for approval. I think
That's a victory. That's a victory, right, Member Thomas? It hasn't been good for a while.
Say again?
I said, that's a victory, right? It hasn't been good for a while.
Yeah, well, it's really good now.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, any other comments, Member Thomas?
No, that's it.
Okay, Member Wen?
The bond parcel committee, there's no update, and we just had our NUSD liaison committee meeting last night, and I'm excited that we will be partnering with the city of Newark, or they already have an annual Ash Street Park neighborhood barbecue that they do after summer school session camps, and they end it with a barbecue for the community. And I asked Superintendent Bakar and the city manager if the district could also play a part in partnering with them moving forward, along with Newark Educational Foundation, to expand the program so that we can provide our students also, and let the community know that this is an event that the city hosts every year annually, and increase participation for our community, and also have safe routes to school be there and presented by the police department, and I know that they also have, the recreation department also does a backpack drive, and then if we can add on any giveaways to our students, that would be great, and have an informational booth out there for the district, for recruitment of students, and then also of teachers, if that's possible. And then with the Newark Educational Foundation, they can also be there, have a presence, and also let the community know what services they also provide to the community. And I think I will get in contact with the recreation director to get the date, and hopefully we can start this summer or before school starts, but if not, they're happy to start whenever we're ready to start. So just wanted to report that out. And I also would like to thank the City of Newark and their staff for hosting us and the liaison committee this past year. So thank you so much. And thank you to our teachers and staff. I hope that everyone's having a great summer vacation. I know that our executive team have been working really diligently in the hiring process to fill all the vacant positions. So I'm very grateful for all of their hard work and dedication. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Wen. Member Jones?
Thank you. Let's see, I'm going to start with the little one first and move up to the big one. A little one is just a reminder that before the student handbooks are printed this summer, that they are updated with any information related to board policies that we have been working on this year, specifically dress code, because it is different. And just double checking that before that is printed, that information is correctly put in there. The next is that when I was going through and looking back at some information, I noticed on the November 7th minutes that my vote was left off of 13.1 and 13.2. Dr. De Leon at the time had moved up several items in the agenda as I was recovering from surgery, and so she was trying to get me out early. And so we had moved up 13.1 and 13.2 to after 10.2, which had also in turn been moved up to under 7.1, I believe. And so in the notes, it would have fallen at a time after I left, but because it had been pushed up, I was actually there, so my vote was not represented. And I can give you the information because I found it on the video, and I even have the hour and minute, so it's easy to reference.
One thing that I'd like to ask you to do is if you could please work with Ms. Lemus on identifying those shortfalls. We'll bring back those minutes. It will have to be amended.
Yeah, it would need to
be able to bring those back.
Yeah, so I'm asking that it get amended so that my vote is represented there. And yes, happy to work with Ms. Lemus on that. No problem. The other is that I would like to make a request that on April 6th or one of the first meetings that when we return for the next school year, that we look at the 2000, August, it's that other A month, August 6th, that we look at the 2023-24 DLI parent survey results, because those results have not been shared with the board, and I think it would be important as we look towards this year and looking at the program and really trying to make some good progress towards having that be a representative. The information needs to be put out. We need to share the information. I'm just going to read my statement because the more I start just talking, I'm just babbling. I believe the results will show us that parents' concerns for their children's growth, as well as the program's lack of instructional fidelity due to several issues. I know that we are constantly working to hire qualified teachers, yet NUSD continues to struggle to find B-clad certified teachers for both the English and Spanish classrooms. This is not just an NUSD issue, but an issue prevalent in other districts surrounding us. I believe that we are currently in need of 8 or 9 B-clad teachers to be in compliance. I don't know if the community is aware that all teachers who work in the DLI program must be B-clad certified, whether they're teaching the English portion or the Spanish portion, in order to be considered a qualified teacher in those classrooms. I know that we will continue to create a successful program this year that shows growth, but it will be very difficult if we don't have our DLI classrooms fully staffed with qualified teachers in August. I am not saying that I want to get rid of the program. I think DLI is a fabulous program and a fabulous concept. I'm just in hopes that we can look at it and create a program that's going to really work for NUSD.
Thank you, Member Jones. So I have a statement along the same lines. So dear board members and NUSD community, as you may recall, last year the board spent significant time putting together goals to help Newark Unified take its performance to the next level and ultimately a future Super Bowl. Goal number one, which we placed as number one because we believe it is the most important, is as follows: student achievement. We will increase student achievement in ELA and mathematics by a minimum of 2% overall and 5% for every student subgroup during the 23-24 school year. And the way we will measure that is through CAS/SBAC and LPAC. When we put these goals together, we use the SMART framework, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, to articulate this goal. Identifying student achievement in ELA and mathematics, which is specific, a 2 to 5% increase in CAF/SBAC scores, which are measurable and attainable, focusing on non-subjective standards used by the California Department of Education, which are relevant, and setting a target time frame of 1 year, which is time-based. And yet, here we are almost a year later, approving over $1 million to continue to support a program, dual language immersion, which back in 2021, more than 3 years ago, promised to deliver grade level academic achievement at Schilling Elementary, and yet has seriously underperformed from its inception to the present. Given this situation, we need to start facing the facts and consider a course correction if we are serious about producing meaningful and measurable academic outcomes for all students in our district. In terms of context, according to the California School Dashboard, prior to the advent of DLI Schilling's English language arts, prior to the advent of DLI, Schilling's English language arts scores in 2019 were 36 points below California state grade level expectations, and in math were 53 points below expectations. This would seem to be a target-rich environment for DLI. And yet, after more than a year in operation, the 2022 ELA scores dropped an additional 23 points, putting Schilling at 59% below state standards. Math was no better, dropping from 53% to 75% below standard. But just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, in 2023, ELA scores went from 59% to 73% below standard. Math performance increased a little, plus 6 points, but still remained a dismal 69% below standard. This year, former Superintendent DeLeon and numerous board members attended multiple DLI meetings to understand how we could support better performance. Yet when we pointed out that the master plan contained more platitudes than SMART goal metrics, all we were greeted with from a small group of supporters were excuses and requests for more resources, and no revamping of a plan that was last updated in May of 2023. In my experience, no sane executive would continue to throw money and resources at a program that is not producing results and has no plan to do so. Here it's important to consider that we as a district shouldn't be wedded to any one program, but instead to the academic outcomes we have targeted. Furthermore, we should be open-minded to alternative approaches that are achieving greater success. Promisingly, we need look no further than Palo Alto Unified, just a stone's throw away from us. When they saw an 8% decline in reading among K-5 key subgroups, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Pacific Islander, English learners, and students with disability, they launched an initiative called Every Student Reads, which they abbreviate as ESR. By adding reading intervention specialists at each school and introducing programs focusing on phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and reading comprehension, Palo Alto Unified was able to completely erase in 1 year the 8% decline they had suffered over the prior 4 years. Just think how many reading intervention specialists at NUSD $1 million could buy, and the associated English proficiency we could achieve if we followed Palo Alto's example. And think about what we could do for math scores if we embarked on a program to transform Schilling into a STEAM magnet school. Newark's DLI program claims to provide a world-class education that will prepare students for success here in Newark and on the world stage. Unfortunately, the program's results say otherwise, and to continue to allow anywhere from 50 to 70% of the kids at Schilling to fall behind their peers is the height of inequity. During our board goal setting for the 24-25 school year, I will be urging the board to hold Schilling's DLI program accountable for producing measurable improvements or be prepared to cancel it for the 25-26 school year. Former 49er championship coach Bill Walsh talked about creating a, quote, standard of excellence, end quote, to achieve Super Bowl greatness. We here at NUSD need to stop mouthing platitudes such as world class and instead focusing on standards and programs that will produce these outcomes. Thank you in advance for considering my goal-setting request. Okay, we're now ending our board comments, and we're moving on.
Could I make one more comment? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Member Thomas.
I was remiss in not thanking Superintendent Vicar and the rest of the staff for making it possible for me to attend this meeting. I'm so grateful that I was able to, and I just really appreciate all the work you did to allow me to attend. Thank you.
And thank you, Member Thomas, for staying up until almost 12 midnight.
Yep, it's 11:45 here.
Okay, all right.
Actually, I think I'm still on Pacific time.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Member Thomas. So if we move on to item 13, Superintendent's concluding comments, updates for the board, and future agenda requests. Superintendent?
Thank you. I'll be very brief. There's a couple items in particular I want to bring to your attention. As many of you know, we've been recruiting really hard trying to fill a lot of vacant positions. We still sit with many vacant positions, our goal and our plan, and we've heard from some parents. We want to thank our parents for reaching out to us, and we will try to respond to you as quickly as possible. They are concerned, rightfully so, as to who will be leading their schools. We are just as concerned, and we are working very closely to be able to bring home a great person to help lead our schools and support our communities, and most importantly, our students and families and our staff. So I just want to thank our team for working so hard on that. The second thing I really want to share with you is at the last board meeting, you all were given an assignment. I don't know if you remember this or not. It got to be kind of late, and I just want to make sure that you remember what the assignment was, because I was asked to send a gentle reminder to the board members. You were asked to identify 10 people in our community with the board, and you need to turn those names into me.
By when?
The first.
Yesterday.
No, the first is not here yet. It's coming, because we've got work to do in July, and we want to be able to make sure that we are able to do some follow-up phone calls. We are looking for active community members who would be willing to potentially serve with us as we start on bond communications out there. So, excellent. So happy to hear.
I've already reached out to all the members of NEF, so.
Cheater.
What's the
Newark Educational Foundation. I do have 10 names for you. They are at home, sitting on my dining room table.
I will be sending you a little brief reminder. You might hear a little something from me on this. We know first of all, we want to make sure that we're engaging with community. That was one of the things that we're doing as part of the whole listening piece, but we also want to make sure that we're reaching out. There's also going to be a survey that was going to be going out, and we'll be sending out a mailer to some of our registered voters, and then we'll also be sending one out to our families and staff through our own platform to be able to get additional feedback from them, specific to things like innovative learning that we need a few more details on, but also some other things within the bond that we want to make sure that we circle back on and that we ensure really good, strong communication and feedback. That's it, that's all I have.
And I would like to just share, Superintendent, that in my class, I'm not a really strict grader, but I'm very strict when it comes to turning things in on time because I believe that that's an important quality in being a successful professional. And sadly, my penalty for every day late, you get potentially 10% reduced from your grade. You put my feet to the fire because I've not started my list, but apparently I have a couple of days left, and so I will just have to work diligently to get you a list. or I can expect as good as I give.
Well,
So.
there is something called extra credit.
Oh, okay, great, excellent, okay. All right, excellent, okay.
Gold star.
All right, very good.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. That's
Okay.
all I have. Thank you so much.
So Member Thomas, can we get a motion to extend the meeting to 12 midnight?
No, thank you.
Okay, so with that, unless there's anything additional, we are adjourning at 9:51 p.m. Meeting is adjourned.